This is the Miller philosopher. Most people think of a story of Beren and Luthien in one of three ways: a romance, a cog in the story of the Silmarils, or as the progenitors of the Númenórean royal bloodline, and by extension of that, Aragorn and Arwen being a direct reflection of them in relationship and bloodline as well. However, I got a different take from that entirely. I saw the relationship as part of a larger family feud between the House of Thingol and the Sons of Feanor, as well as a separate feud between their own bloodline and with Sauron himself. Now, I'm going to assume that most of you listening to this are already familiar with the general story of Beren and Luthien, so I'm just going to skip over to the key parts. Regarding the Sons of Feanor, I should clarify that it's specifically the sons Curufin and Calagram. While I do argue for nuance in most of my videos regarding worldviews and motivations, these two fuckers are characters that arguably could be considered just straight up evil. Seriously, it might not be in a level of Morgoth level evil, but if you gave them the powers of Valar, they probably would be at that level pretty much immediately. In the story, they have ambitions to rule all the elf realms in Beleriand, including those of their own tribe. And they start this plan by taking over Nargothrond through subterfuge, when Beren is brought there and declared that he's going after one of the jewels of their father. By playing good cop, bad cop routine, they literally and surprisingly in a non-violent verbal way steal the throne right out from under their cousin Finrod, who, seeing that they hold sway over his people, decides to lay down the crown to help Beren. They allowed this doomed party to continue on their quest and counting on Morgoth to kill them anyway, not thinking that he's actually going to succeed in getting one of the Silmaril jewels that elf armies had not succeeded in doing anyway. They then kidnap Luthien, who was following Beren, and hold her ransom, demanding her hand in marriage, and thus growing their realm even further. And this is what starts the feud. They accosted Thingol's and Melion's daughter, and he's ready to go to war with Nargothrond because of it. Fortunately, with the aid of Huan, the greatest canine of Middle-earth, and all of fiction arguably, Luthien escapes. She finds Beren and later on battles Sauron. The Maiar is defeated, and he flees in disgrace, thus starting that particular feud. After that, they then encounter Calagram and Curafin sometime later, who were now banished from Nargothrond thanks to word from other survivors that returned, and told the story of how Finrod died for Beren. This nixes both of their plans to both keep Nargothrond and marry their way into Doriath's royal family, and they're quite pissed about it. They jump the couple, but are defeated. So, essentially, the couple are now on the brothers' most wanted list, and Sauron's as well, because of the disgrace that they inflicted upon him, and also ruin any plans that either one of them had for them to look good in front of others or to gain power. And remember that these guys are immortal, so you can bet your ass that it's not just memory that goes deep here. It's also grudges. Now, fast forward to the eve of the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Maedhros and Fingon are gathering allies for their one final assault on Angband. Maedhros, being the good elf he is, tries to discreetly tell Thingol that the Silmaril in his possession, thanks to the efforts of his children by marriage, belongs to him and his brothers by proxy because of their father. And Thingol, being a hothead that he is, not only refuses, but also refuses to send any sizable force to the campaign. Celegrom and Curufin, no doubt still being pissed about the disgrace that they already endured by being beat by a mortal and having their ambitions being thwarted by said mortal, decide to screw the niceties and flat out threaten Doriath with open war should they succeed in the war in the north. Pretty major escalation there. Now, since they're elves, the loss of Beren and Luthien seems like yesterday to the brothers. So yes, their tempers would still be hot. And if not for nothing, everyone knows that when the Feanor faction starts making threats of violence, you best take it seriously, no matter who you are. So, the feud is now furthered, but fortunately for Doriath, the war is lost, and the Feanor faction loses all power and possessions that they once held, leaving Calagram and Curafin no longer able to make good on their threat. So, the feud goes to sleep for a while. Thingol is then murdered, and Melian abandons Doriath, leaving it undefended from hostile invaders, whereby Menegroth is then sacked and destroyed by the Doors of Norgod, who were in turn destroyed by Beren and the Green Elves, allowing him to reclaim the Silmaril. But he and Luthien too eventually die. Again. But they do have a son named Dior, and that son seeks to rebuild Doriath's greatness, as he plans on using the Silmaril to do it. The Sons of Feanor are again stirred to action, and make their usual threat, now that Melian is not there to protect Doriath. Dior, for whatever reason, ignores this, and the faction attacks and sacks Menegroth for a final time. However, it is worth noting that during this conflict, the feud between the houses of Thingol and Feanor does come to an end, even though it's kind of an apocalyptic end, if you will. Because both Calagram and Curufin are killed during the battle. Calagram actually killed by Dior, Beren and Luthien's son, thus avenging his parents. And at the same time, Dior and a good portion of his family is also killed, unfortunately. So I guess you could say that it pretty much ended in near mutual destruction there. Because even though they have one daughter that survives the conflict, no one really profits from this at all. But the fact that this lasted for so long, from Thingol to Luthien and then to Dior, tells me that this was definitely intensely personal for all sides. This wasn't just one of the random feuds of Beren during the First Age. This was a family feud, a generational feud that proceeded over the course of the lives of many people in many decades, as at least mortals saw it. However, what about the claim I made about Sauron? How is the conflict with Sauron and Beren and Luthien also a family generational feud as well? Well, we all know what happens with him, but the reason why I assert that his war and grudge with the Númenóreans, and then by extension Arnor and Gondor, is because it's stated in the Silmarillion that Sauron remembered who the Númenóreans came from and how that went down, that their descendants had now risen to such glory as to rival his own ambitions and visions of Middle-earth during the Second Age, add more fuel to that fire. Corruption was not good enough for the descendants of Beren and Luthien, as had been for other mortal peoples that he had done so. They had to die. All of them had to die. Did the actions of the kings of Númenor further this hatred? Yes, absolutely. But for Sauron, and again, remember him being immortal, this goes way back to their ancestors, and that none of this would have happened in the first place, really, if he had not been beaten way back when in Beren by Luthien. It even implies later on in the Silmarillion that after he finds out, after the downfall of Númenor, that there were survivors, and this was after his own body got destroyed by that Sauron was quite pissed at this. So, to me, his constant scheming and wars through the latter ages are not just about him wanting to rule the world, or so as it's simply put, but more so that any idea of the peoples of Númenor, Arnor, and Gondor, he sees the faces of the couple that originally beat and disgraced him so long ago, and that their continued survival continued to remind him of that disgrace. That is, until his final defeat in the War of the Ring. And that is why I believe that the story of Beren and Luthien is about long-standing grudges between different factions through that family. But if you happen to agree or disagree with that, please let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, this is the Miller Philosopher, and have a good day.